to talk with you today about procurement on return on capital employed. And let's start with a question. What is representing 3% of the workforce but manage 50 to 80% of the costs? Is it the CEO? Is it the accounting department? Or is it procurement? I give you a hint. Check the title of this webinar. Okay. Yes. Obviously, that is the procurement. So, I'm Dr. Renaud Durand. I'm a partner at IAC, and I'm in charge of the procurement practice. Before doing some consulting, I've done occupy some procurement position in the industry as well. And today, to keep me under control, Thomas will moderate this session. So, what are we going to talk about? The first thing is why procurement? Procurement is a significant company driver. Second thing, we'll refresh our memory on what is the return on capital employed and how procurement affects each and every component of the return on capital employed. We then focus on a couple of levers. Then we'll do a little deep dive in an industry, and then we'll step back and think about what procurement can bring on the table and what can be procurement impact on return on capital employed for business. And then we'll move to Q&A. Feel free to ask a question in the chat on the top right corner, and we'll answer some along the way. Let's crack on. So just to recall, as we discussed, procurement is a critical company value and cost driver. So why procurement is important? As we mentioned, 3% is a typical workforce, procurement workforce, managed, depending on the industry, 50 to 80% of the total cost. So clearly, it's an important cost driver, but with all this cost in your supply chain, there's a lot of value and innovation in your supply chain. The historical focus of procurement has been on cost and savings being on the buzzwords of all CPOs, which moved to superior performance on quality, on time, on cost, superior performance. But procurement rarely focus on improving the competitive advantage and the capital efficiency. And it is what we're going to detail today, is that procurement needs to frame its action on improving the return on capital employed, which is a more broader KPI. So let's move to the RoCE. The RoCE, or the return on capital employed, measures the value creation, and all its components can be addressed by procurement levers. You can see on this slide how the tree of the return on capital employed. So first thing, why the return on capital employed could be other financial KPIs. But the good thing about return on capital employed that it looks at the EBIT versus with regards to the capital employed, the capital you need to run your business. So the RoCE is a financial performance which is looked across industries. This is why I picked this one up. For example, Air Liquide, two others are looking after it. So let's have a look to return on capital employed. The RoCE is composed by the EBIT divided by the capital employed. So EBIT, as everybody knows, are the revenues minus cost. While the capital employed represents the sum of the fixed assets, all the assets you mobilize in your plants and factories to produce your equipment and services, the net working capital to be able to run the business, other being typically the risk. So now let's have a look on how procurement affects each component. Let's start with the cost. Cost has been the bread and butter of procurement, is where you got the usual suspects of the levers, such as the category management, commercial negotiations, and total cost of ownership improvements. Let's have a look to the two remaining points, the revenue and the capital employed. On the revenue, we believe that procurement can bring a lot of value on the table. For example, the design to green, which is a combination of design to cost and sustainability management, and reduced time to market, which is an important competitive advantage. Of course, business continuity, we need to have the parts to be able to produce. Procurement can affect as well the capital employed through a few things. One of the major ones is the make versus buy. By increasing the buy ratio, you can reduce your asset in your balance sheet. And there's other working capital improvements, such as the vendor managed inventories, where basically the stock belongs to your suppliers and lighten up a bit your balance sheet. So as you can see, the RoCE is a complete value creation measure of the business and can be affected by procurement in various ways. I would like now to deep dive on a couple of levers, so the design to green and the make versus buy. Why those? Because they affect on one part the revenue and the capital employed. We're not going to cover in much detail the cost reduction because we think that's already in place in a lot of companies. So at RoCE, our approach to design to green is to bring together on one side the cost management and the sustainability impact to perform the right trade-off at the right cost to impact the top line. So why focus on the design to green? For a couple of things. The first one is that the consumer are sensitive to it and is becoming a key buying factor. So it's important to have this one. The other thing, as the automotive industry experience, regulation is becoming more and more stringent. So you will have to do that for the carrot, for your customer, but bear in mind the stick as well with the regulation. The interesting question is, how do you address this topic? It's by connecting the management of the cost and the sustainability together. In a lot of companies, those two approaches are segregated. They are not run together, and we believe it's important to run them together. How? So the cost management is to identify and reduce the cost, and it's typically driven by the procurement, engineering, and operation. While on the other side, the environmental impact is more design to environment, assessing the carbon footprint across the life cycle, is driven usually by the marketing, sales, and sustainability team. And we believe it's important to run them together. And what can procurement do in all of this? Procurement can help to connect both, because there's a lot of cost, so it's a natural player for the cost management, and there's a lot of environmental impact in the supply chain. So we believe that procurement can be a connecting factor between the two approaches. Just to get a bit more real about what can be achieved there, we'd like to take you through a quick example of what we've done with one of our clients on the electrical equipment. And we strongly reduce the environmental footprint by the time horizon of 2025 to 2030. So you can see that we reduce the CO2 footprint quite significantly from production to distribution, and as well on the customer operation, when the equipment is being actually used by the end customer. And you'll notice that there's been as well some cost reduction, some material cost reduction. Typical action was leveraging recycling materials and the change of technologies. So the key things to remember is address them both together and perform the right trade-off, which are not necessarily opposite. So on the make or buy now, which affect the capital employed, what we do is that we spot an anomaly and we detail the strategic change and the opportunity. You can see that during the phase one, we do a mapping of a core level versus outsourcing competitiveness. You can see on the y-axis the level of core, on top being core and the bottom non-core. On the x-axis, from non-competitive to competitive supply market. And for something which is core with a non-competitive market, obviously, there's going to be a make. So that's the gray area. For non-core products and parts with a competitive supply market, there will be the blue area, which is buy. And then we map what you can see at the bubbles, all the activities which are buy and the make. So basically, the make bubbles are gray and should be in the gray area, and the blue bubbles in the blue area. So what we do there is we spot anomaly. In this instance, we spot that the make product one, the gray bubble, belongs to a buy part. So we believe that there might be an opportunity, and we need to double click on this one. And it's what we do there by detailing the strategic change. What does it entail? What is the size of the price? What are the costs, the timeline, and resources needed to secure this change? So we got a question on what are the typical criteria. So there's a lot of criteria. Basically, the core is typically the value for the end client. And on the competitiveness assessment, there's obviously the ecosystem of suppliers being having the right capabilities at the right price point, and we capture as well some other operational such as risk criteria. So thank you for this question. Let's move on. So let's have a look to one industry, the A&D sector, the aerospace and defense. So we picked up this sector because it has been heavily impacted by the COVID, and it's an engineering intense industry which is fairly representative. But we could have picked up other industry such as the medtech or mobility. So we're going to have a look what's the RoCE look like in the aerospace industry and along the value chain, and what was the impact of the COVID. And then we'll step back a bit and we'll have a look to what procurement can do about the return on capital employed across industries. Let's crack on. So there is a various RoCE performances within the aerospace and defense sector. And you can see on this graph with the RoCE in percentage for aircraft manufacturer on one side and supplier on the other side. You can see the RoCE performances for all the players from 2017 in light blue to 2019 in dark blue. And what can we see there? That you got better performances from suppliers than aircraft manufacturer, with roughly across suppliers a 16% average RoCE performance, while we have only 12% RoCE performance for the aircraft manufacturer. And we can see that Boeing had before 2019, which was the impact of the 737 MAX crisis, had a much better return on capital employed than Airbus. And that is due to less plants and to a higher exposure to the defense market, Boeing being exposed to the US market, which is the biggest defense sector where margins are higher. Any question on this? Okay, let's continue then. So we have better RoCE performances from suppliers, which are driven by a higher EBIT. Let's take a deep breath and dive into this graph. So you can see on the y-axis the EBIT versus the one to the capital employed. So the top players will be on the top right corner, maximizing the EBIT and the capital efficiency. You can see that for each player, we got the track from 2017 to 2019 performance in terms of EBIT and capital employed. And you can see that return on capital employed is a combination of two. And we can see that the different lines represent RoCE performances across EBIT and capital employed. So the red line being only 5% and the green line being 20% RoCE performance. And there, what can we see? We can see that the points in light blue, such as Honeywell, Safran, Thales, tends to have a higher EBIT than the aircraft manufacturer. So the suppliers got a better EBIT, but they got a lower, they use more capital. So that seems to indicate that they could improve, reduce the capital employed by using levers such as the make versus buy reduction. The aircraft manufacturer could work obviously on the EBIT, and especially Airbus could work as well on the rationalization of their manufacturing capabilities, because Airbus got much more a higher number of plants than Boeing, and you can see that on this graph. So Airbus could increase its exposure to increase the EBIT to two things. First, having access to more exposure to the after-sales market, Airbus doing a lot of OEM works, but a little services. So there's higher margin there, and could increase their defense exposure more like Boeing. And you can see on the Boeing the reduction due to the 737. So why do suppliers have a better performance? Thank you for this question. So suppliers got higher performance due to a few reasons. The first one being they tend to have more IP, intellectual property, so higher increased barrier to enter. And that's the case as well in the automotive industry, where more and more value is being pushed toward the supply chain. They got more diversified revenues. For example, Honeywell is exposed to Airbus and Boeing, for example, so they mitigate their risk on the revenue. And one of the key, for example, Safran, are making a lot of most of their revenues through the after-sales market. On the spare parts, the margins are very high. Last one, maybe on the Thales, where we've seen that they've been able to maintain the EBIT almost constant, but we see that there was quite a strong reduction of the capital efficiency. So there we believe that they could should run some more make versus buy analysis to improve their capital. So what was the impact on the COVID on R&D players? So as you could expect, the impact has been quite strong, and you can see on this graph for aircraft manufacturer and suppliers the RoCE performances from 2019 to 2020, and we can see that there's been a higher impact on the aircraft manufacturer and on the suppliers. So from a bit less than 10% for the aircraft manufacturer to about 7% for the supplier. Supplier had a better resilience due to more diversification, especially on the defense. Okay, so now let's move to the question that we all wonder: what can procurement bring on the table? How much RoCE impact can we expect from procurement? So let's have a look and come out from the specific focus on the aerospace and defense sector and have a look more broader. So you can see that procurement can double the business return on capital employed, which is quite large. You can see the RoCE performances in percentage. So we picked up 10 as being some kind of average across industrial players. And you can see the improvements on each component of the return on capital employed. The first one being cost reduction, which is kind of bread and butter from procurement. There, the impact is typically about 5%. But let's have a look to the other. We believe that the procurement could impact a lot the revenue side as well For example, with the time to market, we help a client to improve their lead time and to reduce it significantly and to unlock new revenues. In this instance, it was a sensing system company wanted to get into the nuclear maintenance market, and this market needs very short lead time. So before the time to market reduction was not able to match the required time to market. So by reducing the lead time, you can access some more revenues. On the capital employed, through increase by ratio, you could as well reduce the capital employed. So in a nutshell, beyond the typical 5% RoCE improvement that procurement is working on through the cost, we believe there's about the same of untapped value that could be brought by procurement. So we got a question about those levers. Are they applicable for all industries? So the answer is yes. They're applicable to all engineering intense industries and even beyond. For example, on the revenue, I'll give you a couple of examples from the consumer market. The time to market reduction, for example, everybody knows that it's a competitive advantage of Amazon being able to deliver the next day or even in a few hours, and that's what help Amazon to secure what they become. And the other example is the Inditex with the brand Zara, which actually designed its supply chain to be quite local to Europe, typically in Portugal or in a big country nearby, rather than opposed to sourcing in Asia. The impact on this reduced time to market is that Zara is able to design more frequently their product and test them on the market more regularly and being more successful. So, for example, this for Zara of Amazon, 100% of the revenues come from this time to market performance. On some other consumer product or industrial sensitive equipment, you can have as well design to green, where you got more and more regulation and consumer attention to it. So that's our kind of average. After we need to see in your own industry what procurement can do to unlock new source of revenues or be able to help the company to transform their backlog into revenues. So what are the key takeaways I would like you to remember from this webinar? The first, procurement is not only a source of cost reduction, but a source of competitive advantage. For procurement to focus on broader KPIs than only cost savings. These KPIs shall be in line with your company strategy. We picked up the return on capital employed, but that could be shareholder return value, or there's other KPIs, and the approach can be tuned to those KPIs. But it needs to be a financial KPIs, quite holistic, the most value. Design to green is becoming inevitable, and that is something that we should keep in mind due to consumer and regulation. The need, cost and sustainability need to be addressed together, and procurement got a big role to play there due to the impact of the supply chain on cost and sustainability. And procurement can be bold and could double the RoCE business performance and deliver about 9 to 10 RoCE improvements. So you can find as well my contact details on the right if you have any other question you want to take offline. We're going to send you the video of this webinar that we hope you enjoyed, and as well with the material of this presentation. Is there any other question? All right, guys, I hope you enjoyed it. It was a pleasure to share my passion about what procurement can bring at the table and the value it delivers. And we hope you enjoyed it, and we will be happy to have a conversation with you about this exciting topic. Take care.